book of tintypes was owned by Elizabeth Hickling Bradford. It was something that she collected as a young woman. Tintypes were a relatively inexpensive way to produce photographs at the time, and so they could be traded back and forth between friends and family. And these types of books were created specifically to collect tintypes. Most of them are labeled or are identifiable, and we know that they're close friends and family. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, it's actually an image of an African-American man, and the fact that he is in an album of friends and family leads us to question who he might be, indicative of the type of companions that this family was keeping and the types of sort of intellectual pursuit, the fact that they were relatively open-minded and passionate about abolition. The inclusion of modern art or contemporary art in our display is a rather unique element. In 2013-14, we actually embarked on a project to invite local artists to visit the Bradford House Museum, as it was prior, and to create an original work of art based on their experience in the museum. So you will see contemporary art embedded in with all of the historical artifacts, all as one, and the idea is this sort of continuum that their experiences as part of the historical narrative are not so far removed from what we're experiencing today in the 21st century, and we want to keep reminding you of that relevance. And they were founding members of the Temperance League here in Duxbury, which of course was trying to fight the social ills that were caused by alcoholism in the 19th century, which was a very prevalent problem among many different layers of society at the time. We also talk about their movement into abolition and the types of people that they knew and they were involved with. We have quite a lot of information on their companions and the people on both the temperance circuit as well as the anti-slavery circuit. The speakers would actually stop here in this house and spend the night. This was known as a bastion of anti-slavery sentiment. That's actually a quote from the Liberator in the 1860s. So to consider yourself an anti-slavery advocate, to be an abolitionist, was about 1% of the northern population. So they were definitely in the minority, and in many cases you could lose your job, you could lose your social standing, you could be at odds with your neighbors and even your family. But within this family, the sentiment was strong enough that the Bradfords really stuck by their morals and not only believed in it, but were actively involved in the cause. So the white ribbon in this case, which is emblazoned with Coldwater Army, is one of our newest acquisitions here in Duxbury. In 1842, the Coldwater Army, as an organization, actually recruited children towards the temperance cause. And children would, they're documented as, going to picnics and going out to other types of gatherings and fields and enjoying themselves, all while they were proudly wearing their Coldwater white silk ribbons on their sleeves. During the 19th century, children were actually consumers of alcohol. Water was somewhat considered unhealthy, so children would drink beer, for instance. And so, when it came to temperance, children were also a possibility for conversion. We wanted to ask people to engage in dialogue with the material. So when you come up, you can hear Claudius Bradford's sermon, which was an anti-slavery sentiment. You can stand up there, you can feel what it would have been like to listen to the words and to stand at the podium. But we also ask you to participate in the exhibition and to write on one of these cards what it is that you fight for. American history is peppered with moments in which individuals stood up to speak about or to protest or to fight for things that they believed in. And it seems to me like that question is ever more present in today's world than it ever has been. In the middle, the 1851 pamphlet is a copy of Claudius Bradford's sermon, the one that you can hear on audio over at the pulpit. In 1851, Claudius Bradford, who was Mariah's husband, was in Bridgewater, and he woke up on a Sunday morning and decided to deliver this sermon, which was a fiery protest against not only slavery, but the very recently passed fugitive slave law, which required people to not only allow for the return of African Americans to the South, but to help the return of them. So he stood up on a Sunday morning and he delivered this beautiful sermon, knowing that the audience that he was delivering it to was probably not going to be very receptive about it. And in fact, they stood up, they turned their backs on him, and they effectively fired him. So he not only lost his livelihood, but he also lost his standing and his salary and his home as well. Bridgewater was a difficult town. for people who were sort of plying the abolitionist cause. Bridgewater was making cotton gins.
If there is one subject that takes a special lead and prominence of all others this day, if there is one that should fill us with regret and sorrow and alarm on this day, it is